My name is Steve Miller. I'm the director for Wicomico County Recreation Parks and Tourism. I want to thank the Chamber and the University for hosting this event. And we appreciate tourism being included on this because we certainly feel like tourism is an economic engine for the county. For my part today, my outline is very simple. I wanted to communicate 3 basic points to you. Number 1, I want to give you just a very brief overview of tourism trending, essentially where we've been in the last 5 years. Secondly, I want to share with you a few of the big things that are happening on the county level that impact the regional economy. And then lastly, I'd like to look out on the horizon and just share a few thoughts of what we expect and what we see coming down the pike related to tourism. Now, in terms of tourism trending, where we've been, there are several ways that we measure tourism activity and our progress in tourism. And one of the ways we rely on most heavily in terms of the county is by hotel room tax collections. Many of you probably know this, but in terms of tax, local tax revenue or county tax appropriation, our tourism operation receives a grand total of $0. We are funded almost entirely by a hotel room tax collection, which is paid by outsiders, by a state grant, and then also through monies that we generate through the events that we run. But there's no local tax appropriation in tourism. If you look at trending in tourism room tax collections, this shows you over the last 5 years, we've grown from about 1.2 million to about 1.5 million total collections in hotel room tax. That's a hard number. That's 29% growth over the last 5 years. The orange bars there represent the collection that runs our tourism operation. 2/3 of that collection goes to run the tourism operation. The other third is split evenly between the city of Salisbury to support the zoo and the Youth and Civic Center. But that is room tax trend collecting, and you can see that that's been very positive over the last 5 years. Another way that we measure progress in tourism is through the economic impact that our events have on the community. Now, I'll be the first to confess that I'm not an economist, and I'm certainly no memo derricker, though I strive to be someday. But one of the things I've learned over the years is that calculating economic impact for events is not an exact science. There are studies and there are trending data that you can get throughout the country about what people typically spend for certain types of events, how they travel, what they spend, where they spend, and all those things are very helpful tools for us to try to gauge what kind of impact our events have on the community. What we've done on the county level is we've taken kind of a conglomeration of tools from the state and from national tools, and we have developed our own tool that we use to measure the impact of the events that we run. Just to give you an idea, this is just now tourism events that my department is involved with running. Over the last 5 years, we've grown, that first number is actually wrong, we've grown from about 39 million to about 50 million, which is a 26% growth over the last 5 years. So that's very consistent with what we're seeing in the room tax collections. So those are a couple of internal measurements that we use to gauge how we're trending, and both have been very positive over the last 5 years. Now, from an external point of view, we also look at external measurements. There's a group called Tourism Economics, and they do an annual study on tourism in the state of Maryland. They look county by county and give you what their study shows in terms of how you're trending as a county. So here's the story that it tells. In terms of annual visitors, we've increased by 20% over 5 years. In terms of tourism industry sales, we've increased by 17% over 5 years. Tourism employment, 13% over the last 5 years. Tourism tax receipt collections, 19% growth over the last 5 years. If you want this to study it, I'm kind of flying through, but you see the trend and you see the direction that it's all going. All these statistics are telling us the same story, and that is, over the last 5 years, we've seen significant growth in tourism. Now, how do we compare to the state of Maryland? How do we compare to our neighbors in terms of our growth? What we did, if you can see this slide, what we did is compare ourselves, we're the red, we compared ourselves to the state of Maryland, which is the blue, Dorchester, Ocean City, and Worcester County. When you look across the board at these 4 measurements, compared to the state of Maryland, compared to Dorchester County, we're ahead in all 4 of these categories in terms of our rate of growth. And as far as Worcester County and Ocean City goes, we're right on pace with them. In 2 categories we're ahead, in 2 categories we're behind. But we're trending quite well when you compare it to our neighbors and to certainly the state averages. So I'm kind of breezing through, but in a nutshell, basically where we've been in the last 5 years, you look at all that together, the story tells us that tourism is certainly an economic engine, and it's growing, and the rate of growth has been something very positive. Now, in terms of my second point here, I want to just mention a few of the big things that are happening on the county level in terms of tourism to try to help continue to increase these numbers. I can't get into the details, but I'd like to just share a few of the things that we're doing on the county level. Now, I would like to preface that by acknowledging the fact that we're not the only game in town as far as tourism goes. The county certainly invests, and we do a lot as far as tourism, but there's other tourism that happens. There's transient tourism, there's business travel, there's other organizations in the county that run events that bring in tourism. Salisbury University, Seagull Century is a great example of that. My office doesn't participate in that, but that certainly brings in visitors and dollars to the community. So there are other things that happen that make up the whole picture of what we get in tourism. But I would like to share a couple of examples on the county level of initiatives that are bringing dollars in, but also raising our profile, our tourism profile as a community. One great example, the Governor's Challenge basketball tournament. That will start a week from today, in fact. That event started in the 1980s. I don't know if any of you remember when that started. It started with 4 teams in the 1980s. I'm pleased to tell you today that next week when this event starts, this will be the largest holiday basketball tournament, not in Maryland, not in the Mid-Atlantic, not on the East Coast. It will be the largest holiday tournament in the United States of America. Thank you. And that is here in little Wicomico County. Who would have thought? Who would have believed it? The USSSA Girls Softball Tournament, that event has been big for a long time. Many of you know about that event, 3 weeks in the summertime. It's been big. It's about a $17 million impact annually to this region's economy. But I'm pleased also to tell you that this summer, in our 11th year, was the first time that we could say that this was the biggest girls softball tournament, again, in the United States of America, right here in Wicomico County. And there are many other examples. In September, we hosted a Golden Retriever National Dog Show at the Civic Center. It was 2,000 dogs for 7 days. I still see clumps of hair around the Civic Center flying around. And if you must know, yes, I am jealous of the hair. That's a different forecast altogether. That goes in a different direction. But that's another national event. These are national caliber events that bring in dollars and raise our profile as a tourism community. And then you look at all the other high-profile events that take place in this community. I mentioned the Seagull Century. That's certainly a high-profile event that brings in a lot of folks. You look at what the city of Salisbury is taking on this year with the marathon, the National Folk Festival. Again, these are things that bring in outside dollars and raise our profile as a community and as part of the big picture. So that's one of the things we're doing. We're investing in these large events, large-scale events to draw tourism. One of the other things we're doing on the county level, besides the events, is we're investing in facilities that can accommodate this type of activity that we're talking about. As we speak, we are finalizing a $3 million expansion to the Henry Parker Sports Complex. That's our premier sports complex. When that's done in the next 2 months, that will be the premier baseball, softball facility in this entire region. And it will give the county our first public synthetic turf baseball, softball fields, which we use for tournaments, but we're also going to use for local play. That's an important point. We want locals to be able to enjoy this asset, and that's what's going to happen. The Civic Center is also being renovated. We spent about $3 million at the Youth and Civic Center. If you've not been there, brand new seats in the arena. It looks brand new in there. We've added carpet and new lights and new wall treatments and all the rest. And there's more to come, but certainly we've made some strides at the Civic Center. Purdue Stadium is another quality of life asset that we have in this community. We've invested $3 million there. It'll be $4 million by the time we're done, hopefully in about a year from now, but that's another asset that draws folks into this community. And so that's an important thing that we invest not only in these major events, but also in our facilities. And that brings me to my last point. I'd like to share just a couple of thoughts as we look out on the horizon, what's coming down the road. Again, I'm not an economist, but I'll just share a couple of quick observations on how we think it might impact us in terms of tourism in the county. One of the things that's been obvious over the last few years is just the incredible amount of competition that we're going to be facing in the marketplace. Particularly, at one time not very long ago, we were way ahead of the curve, particularly when you're talking about amateur sports tourism, things like the basketball, things like softball. That market's not a well-kept secret anymore. According to the National Association of Sports Commissions, NASC, they estimate in visitor spending annually that visitors spend $9.4 billion a year traveling to these amateur sports tournaments all across the country. Just to give you an idea of the type of growth and competition that we're talking about, in the year 2000, which was not very long ago, in the year 2000 there were less than 40 sports commissions and CVBs, people like us, that were actively competing for this type of business, this type of market, less than 40. In the year 2017, there are over 500 destinations that are now competing in this type of marketplace, trying to compete for the same business. And many of these communities, many of these destinations are much bigger than ours, much wealthier than ours, and many of them are building brand new facilities. NASC just recently did a survey of its members, and they said 40% of its members said that in the last year they've built a brand new facility. 75% of them said in the last year, like us, they've renovated a facility and improved a facility. You look everywhere, and these things are popping up everywhere because people are fighting for this business. You even look in our own backyard, you see turf complexes going up in the state of Delaware. You see Ocean City Convention Centers expanding again. We know of several towns in Pennsylvania, Virginia that are actively shopping for the business that we have. So it's a very, very competitive marketplace that's going to be a challenge for us as we go down the road and try to compete. And that's one of the reasons why these investments that we've made in these facilities is so important. Because if we did nothing and we just allowed ourselves to get old and stale, this would bypass us very, very quickly. And so we're competing and we're trying to retain the business that we have and certainly recruit new business. And so that's one part, increased competition. A couple other things that we're watching that I think will impact us just trending-wise is that there's change in business and corporate travel. That's been happening for many years. But business corporate travel with technology the way it is, people don't travel to meetings as much as they used to 5, 10 years ago. And so that's dropped off in the last several years. I think that's leveled out from what we've heard. But certainly that's something that impacts us as technology advances. And then another thing that we've seen from regional and national economists is that they feel like, as far as projection-wise, they feel like hotel occupancy will probably flatten out and maybe even dip a little bit. Over the last few years, as this has been booming, new hotels and different properties have been built, and of course that the demand drives the market down in the other direction. So we think that it could perhaps flatten out or level. So again, I'm not into predictions or anything of that nature, but our expectation is in terms of the rate of growth, we do expect that to slow down and maybe flatten out. But our hope is, and what we'll continue to do as a county, is with our facilities and the other assets that we have, we'll try to continue to leverage those things and sell those things to retain and to draw in business. So that gives you a very brief overview of where we are in tourism, where we think we're going. I'll close with the words of the great Steve Miller Band. When it comes to tourism, we take the money and run. Thank you very much.